The Luna forced me to sleep in the stables until the Alpha King found me dying. The first night I slept in the stables, it rained. Not the gentle kind of rain that whispered against rooftops. The cruel kind. The kind that soaked through old wood and turned straw into mud. The kind that made the cold feel alive. I curled myself into the corner beside an old mare named Daisy and pulled my thin blanket tighter around my shoulders. It didn't help. Nothing helped. Not after what Luna Victoria had done. Not after she stood before the entire pack and declared that I was no longer worthy of living inside the pack house. "You should be grateful I'm letting you stay at all," she'd said. The memory still burned. I had stood in the center of the courtyard while dozens of pack members watched. My hands shook. My stomach growled from hunger. And Victoria smiled. She always smiled when she was hurting someone. "Since you seem incapable of performing even the simplest duties," she'd continued, "you can sleep with the animals." Laughter followed. Not from everyone. But enough. Enough to make my face burn. Enough to make me wish the ground would swallow me whole. I lowered my head and accepted the punishment. What else could I do? I was an orphan. A servant. The weakest wolf in the entire pack. No family. No allies. No voice. And Luna Victoria knew it. That was why she targeted me. Because no one would stop her. No one ever did. The stable door creaked open. Wind rushed inside. I flinched. For one hopeful second, I thought someone had come looking for me. But it was only another gust of rain. The door slammed shut again. Silence returned. I buried my face in my arms. And cried. Not loudly. I had learned long ago not to cry loudly. People noticed loud crying. And when people noticed, they asked questions. Questions led to trouble. Trouble led to punishment. So I cried silently. Like always. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. Inside, Daisy shifted beside me and nudged my shoulder gently with her nose. I laughed weakly. "At least you're kind." The horse huffed softly. For a moment, I pretended she understood. Pretended she was my friend. It was a childish thought. But loneliness makes people believe strange things. Especially after years of being treated like they don't belong. I stared through a crack in the stable wall. The Alpha house stood atop the hill. Warm lights glowed from the windows. The pack's most powerful wolves slept comfortably inside, including Alpha King Rowan Blackwood, the most feared alpha in the Northern Territories. I had only seen him twice. Both times from a distance. Both times surrounded by warriors. He was rarely home. Always traveling. Always fighting. Always protecting pack borders. People said he was ruthless. People said enemies feared hearing his name. People said he could kill a rogue wolf with his bare hands. But none of that mattered to me. A king might as well be a star in the sky. Visible. Beautiful. Untouchable. The rain intensified. Water dripped through the roof. One drop landed directly on my forehead. Then another. Then another. I sighed. Another sleepless night. Another miserable punishment. Another reminder that my life meant nothing. Little did I know. Everything was about to change. Because while I sat shivering in the darkness, someone was riding toward the pack. Someone carrying secrets. Someone carrying lies. And someone carrying a message that would eventually place my life directly in the path of the Alpha King himself. The beginning of my nightmare. And my salvation had already begun. The next morning began before sunrise. Not because I wanted it to. Because Luna Victoria made sure servants never slept later than she did. A loud bang echoed through the stable. The door flew open. Cold air rushed inside. I jerked awake immediately. One of the house servants stood in the doorway. "Mira." I scrambled to my feet. "Why, yes. You're late." My eyes widened. The sky outside was still dark. "Late? Don't argue." The servant tossed a bucket at my feet. "The Luna wants fresh water in every guest room before dawn." I caught the bucket before it rolled away. My muscles already ached. I had barely slept. The stable floor had been freezing. Rainwater had soaked half my blanket. But excuses didn't matter. Not here. Not to Victoria. I hurried toward the well. The cold morning air bit through my thin dress. The pack grounds were quiet. Most wolves were still asleep. Only servants and guards moved through the darkness. The lucky ones avoided looking at me. The cruel ones didn't. A pair of young wolves standing near the kitchens laughed as I passed. Look, the stable girl. I lowered my gaze and kept walking. Years of experience had taught me something important. Sometimes silence hurt less than fighting back. Not always, but usually. The well water felt like ice. I lowered the bucket, pulled, filled, carried. Again, and again, and again. By the time the eastern sky turned gray, my arms trembled from exhaustion. Still, the work wasn't finished. It never was. By breakfast, I was cleaning floors. By midday, I was washing laundry. By afternoon, I was scrubbing mud from the training grounds. And, throughout it all, Luna Victoria watched. She always watched. Like a hawk waiting for weakness. Waiting for mistakes. Waiting for reasons to punish. Near sunset, I finally made one. A small one. An accidental one. The kind any normal person would forgive. I dropped a serving tray. The crash echoed through the dining hall. Silence followed. My stomach dropped immediately. Slowly. Very slowly. Victoria stood from her chair. Beautiful. Elegant. Terrifying. Her silver gown swept across the floor as she approached. The room remained silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Everyone knew what came next. She stopped directly in front of me. Her blue eyes were ice. What happened? My voice shook. I slipped. Her smile appeared instantly. The dangerous one. Oh. A pause. You slipped. I nodded. Yes, Luna. The slap came without warning. Pain exploded across my cheek. Gasps echoed through the hall. I stumbled sideways. Nearly fell. But managed to stay upright. My face burned. My eyes watered. Victoria leaned closer. Do servants think my floors clean themselves? No, Luna. Do servants think food prepares itself? No, Luna. Then perhaps servants should stop making excuses. I swallowed hard. Yes, Luna. Another smile. Satisfied. Victorious. She turned away. Conversation slowly resumed. People looked down at their plates. Pretending they hadn't seen anything. Pretending they hadn't heard. Pretending they weren't relieved it wasn't happening to them. I gathered the broken pieces with shaking hands. A small drop of blood rolled from my finger. No one noticed. Or cared. By nightfall, I returned to the stable. Hungry. Exhausted. Humiliated. Again. The horses greeted me more warmly than most pack members ever had. Daisy nudged my shoulder. I smiled weakly. Long day, she huffed. For a brief moment, I forgot how miserable everything felt. Then the stable door opened again. I froze. A young messenger entered. He carried the pack crest on his cloak. His face was pale. Nervous. Like someone carrying dangerous news. He glanced around. Made sure nobody else was listening. Then looked directly at me. You. I blinked. Me? Yes. He stepped closer. Lowered his voice. Has anyone ever told you who your parents really were? My heart stopped. The question hit harder than Victoria's slap. Nobody asked about my parents. Nobody. Because nobody knew. Or at least, that's what I'd always believed. What? The messenger hesitated. Fear flashed across his face. As if he regretted speaking. Then footsteps sounded outside. His eyes widened. They're coming. Who? But he was already backing away. Forget I said anything. What do you mean? Forget it. The stable door opened. Another servant entered. The messenger immediately changed expression. Smiled. Pretended nothing had happened. Then walked away. Leaving me standing there. Confused. Breathless. And suddenly unable to stop thinking about one terrifying question. Who were my parents? And why had a stranger looked so frightened after mentioning them? Outside. Far beyond the pack borders. Alpha King Rowan Blackwood was finally returning home. And with him came answers that would change everything. But those answers were buried beneath lies. And before the truth could be revealed, I would suffer far more than a cold stable floor. Far more than a slap. Far more than humiliation. Because Luna Victoria was about to make sure my life became a living nightmare. And she had only just begun. I barely slept that night. The messenger's words haunted me. Has anyone ever told you who your parents really were? Again and again, the question echoed through my mind. Who were they? Why would anyone ask me that? And why had he looked terrified afterward? I stared at the stable's ceiling long after midnight. Rain had stopped. Moonlight slipped through the cracks in the wooden walls. The horses slept peacefully. I envied them. At least they belonged somewhere. At least someone cared whether they were fed. I wasn't sure anyone would notice if I disappeared. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me into a restless sleep. Unfortunately, morning arrived far too quickly. The stable door burst open before dawn. Mira. I sat upright immediately. The head servant stood in the doorway. His expression looked unusually tense. Get up. I hurried to my feet. What's wrong? The Alpha King is returning. My stomach dropped. The Alpha King? Today. Suddenly, the entire pack was in chaos. Servants rushed across the grounds. Warriors prepared ceremonial formations. Cooks worked frantically in the kitchens. Everyone wanted everything perfect. Because Alpha King Rowan Blackwood was finally coming home. The entire morning became a blur. I scrubbed floors, carried supplies, polished silver dishes, ran messages between buildings. No matter how fast I worked, it never seemed enough. Everywhere I turned, people shouted instructions. Everywhere I looked, someone was panicking. And above all of it stood Luna Victoria. Watching, controlling, demanding perfection. By midday, my legs already felt weak. I hadn't eaten since yesterday. But stopping wasn't an option. Not if I wanted to avoid punishment. The royal courtyard looked magnificent. Colorful banners hung from every wall. Fresh flowers decorated stone archways. The pack symbol gleamed proudly above the entrance. Everything looked beautiful. Everything except me. My dress was stained. My hands were cracked from work. And dark circles shadowed my eyes. I tried not to think about it. Servants weren't supposed to be noticed anyway. Then the horn sounded. A deep blast echoed across the mountains. The Alpha King had arrived. Immediately everyone rushed toward the main courtyard. Including me. Not because I wanted to. Because I was carrying a tray of drinks. I slipped into the crowd's edge. Trying to remain invisible. Trying not to draw attention. The massive gates opened. And Rowan Blackwood rode through. For a moment, the entire world seemed to stop. He looked exactly like the stories described. Tall, powerful, commanding. Dark hair moved with the wind. His black armor gleamed beneath the sunlight. A massive wolf walked beside his horse. Not chained, not controlled. Loyal. His golden eyes scanned the crowd. Sharp, observant, dangerous. This wasn't the kind of man people ignored. This was the kind of man entire armies feared. The crowd erupted into cheers. People bowed. Warriors saluted. Children waved excitedly. Rowan acknowledged them with a nod. Nothing more. His expression remained serious. Focused. Like a king carrying burdens no one else could see. I lowered my gaze immediately. Servants weren't supposed to stare. Especially not at the Alpha King. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. Someone bumped into me. Hard. The tray slipped. My balance vanished. Before I could recover, I crashed into another servant. The tray flew from my hands. Silver cups scattered across the courtyard. The sound echoed like thunder. Silence followed. Complete silence. My heart stopped. No. 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 Not today. Not now. Slowly. Very slowly. I looked up. And discovered every eye in the courtyard staring at me. Including Luna Victoria's. Her expression darkened instantly. The crowd parted. Giving her room to approach. Like prey moving aside for a predator. I knew that look. I knew exactly what was coming. Victoria stopped directly in front of me. What? She said softly. Have you done? I'm sorry. My voice barely worked. I'm so sorry. Her eyes narrowed. Do you realize whose arrival ceremony you just disrupted? I swallowed. Yes, Luna. And? I lowered my head. It was an accident. The words were barely out before she struck me. Harder than before. The force knocked me onto the stone courtyard. Gasps spread through the crowd. Pain exploded across my cheek. The world spun. I heard whispers. But nobody moved. Nobody intervened. Nobody ever did. Victoria grabbed my arm. Pulled me upright. Her nails dug painfully into my skin. "You're pathetic." The words landed harder than the slap. "You ruin everything you touch." I stared at the ground. Fighting tears. Fighting humiliation. Fighting the urge to disappear. Then something unexpected happened. A deep voice interrupted. "Enough." The courtyard froze. Every single person turned. Including Victoria. Including me. Including the warriors. The voice belonged to only one man. Alpha King Rowan Blackwood. Silence fell. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Dangerous. Victoria immediately released my arm. Her expression transformed. Gone was the cruelty. Gone was the anger. In its place appeared a perfect smile. "My king." Rowan's golden eyes remained fixed on her. Not warm. Not impressed. Simply watching. Evaluating. "Why is a servant bleeding during my welcome ceremony?" The question struck like lightning. Nobody answered immediately. Not even Victoria. For the first time all day, someone had noticed me. Not the tray. Not the mistake. Me. And something about that realization made my chest ache. Because I had spent so long being invisible that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Victoria recovered quickly. It was merely an accident. Her voice was sweet. Convincing. Practiced. "The girl is clumsy." Rowan's gaze shifted toward me. For one brief second our eyes met. Golden. Silver. King. Servant. The moment lasted only a heartbeat. Yet something about it felt strangely important. Strangely unsettling. Then Rowan looked away. "See that she's treated fairly." The words were simple. Nothing more. No rescue. No miracle. No dramatic intervention. Just fairness. The bare minimum. And yet, it was more kindness than I'd received in years. Rowan continued toward the Alpha house. The crowd slowly relaxed. Conversation resumed. But Victoria's smile had vanished. Completely. And when she looked at me again, I knew immediately I was in trouble. Terrible trouble. Because Alpha Rowan had embarrassed her publicly. And Luna Victoria never forgave humiliation. Never. As the crowd dispersed, she leaned close enough that only I could hear. Her voice became a whisper. Cold. Venomous. "You'll regret that." My blood ran cold. Because I knew she wasn't talking about the tray. She was talking about the Alpha King noticing I existed. And somehow, that frightened her. The moment Victoria walked away, I knew my life had just become more dangerous. Not because Alpha Rowan had punished her. He hadn't. Not because he had defended me. He hadn't done that either. The danger came from something much simpler. He had noticed me. And Luna Victoria hated anything that drew attention away from her. Especially if that attention came from the Alpha King. The rest of the afternoon passed beneath a cloud of dread. Every task felt heavier. Every hallway felt colder. Every glance from Victoria's servants carried an edge of warning. They knew what happened to people who embarrassed the Luna. And unfortunately, so did I. By evening, the celebration feast had begun. The great hall overflowed with laughter, music, and expensive food. Roasted meats. Fresh bread. Sweet fruit. Everything smelled incredible. Unfortunately, servants weren't allowed to eat until the guests finished. Which meant I spent hours carrying platters while my stomach twisted painfully from hunger. At one point, I caught sight of Alpha Rowan seated at the head table. Warriors surrounded him. Pack leaders listened attentively as he spoke. Unlike Victoria, he didn't seem interested in being admired. He looked tired. The kind of tired that came from carrying responsibility for too long. A strange feeling tugged at my chest. Sympathy. I quickly pushed it away. Kings and servants lived in different worlds. There was no reason to think about him. Then I saw Victoria. She was watching him. Smiling. Laughing at things that weren't funny. Trying far too hard to capture his attention. Yet Rowan barely looked her way. If he noticed her efforts, he gave no sign. The realization seemed to irritate her. And every time she became irritated, someone else suffered. Unfortunately, that someone was usually me. Near midnight, the feast finally ended. Guests departed. Musicians packed their instruments. Servants began cleaning. I hoped the day was finally over. I was wrong. Mira. My entire body tensed. Victoria stood near the hall entrance, waiting, smiling. The dangerous smile. The one that promised pain. Come here. I obeyed immediately. Disobedience only made things worse. When I reached her, she folded her arms. I've decided your current punishment isn't sufficient. My stomach dropped. Luna, you clearly haven't learned humility. The accusation made no sense. But logic rarely mattered when Victoria was angry. She had already decided the outcome. Now she was simply enjoying the process. What would you have me do? I asked quietly. Her smile widened. Oh, don't worry. She stepped closer. I've already decided. The next morning, my punishment began. The stable was no longer my home. At least not entirely. Victoria ordered me moved to the livestock shed behind the far pasture. A place even servants avoided. The building was old, broken, unsafe. Half the roof had collapsed years ago. Winter winds slipped through every crack. Rain flooded the floor whenever storms arrived. Even the animals seemed miserable there. When the head servant delivered the news, he looked uncomfortable. Please don't make this harder. I stared at him. You know this is wrong. His gaze dropped. A long silence followed. Finally he whispered, I know. Then he walked away, leaving me alone. The truth hurt more than the punishment. Because people knew. They always knew. They knew Victoria was cruel. They knew she abused her authority. They knew she targeted those who couldn't fight back. Yet nobody stopped her. Fear was stronger than compassion. Every time. Days passed. Then a week. Then another. The weather worsened. Cold winds swept across the mountains. Rain became constant. Food portions became smaller. Work hours became longer. And my body slowly began to fail. The first sign was dizziness. Simple at first. Easy to ignore. Then came weakness. Persistent exhaustion. A cough that refused to disappear. Still, I worked. Because servants who couldn't work weren't useful. And useless servants rarely lasted long. One evening, while hauling water buckets uphill, my vision suddenly blurred. The world tilted. The bucket slipped from my hands. Water splashed across the ground. I barely remained standing. A nearby servant rushed forward. Mira. I'm fine. The lie sounded weak. Even to me. Unfortunately, Victoria saw everything. She approached immediately. Anger flashing in her eyes. What happened? The servant hesitated. Mira nearly fainted. A mistake. The moment he spoke, regret crossed his face. Victoria's expression hardened. Is that true? I lowered my gaze. Only for a moment. How disappointing. The words were cold. Emotionless. Like she was discussing damaged furniture. Not a person. You expect sympathy because you're tired? No, Luna. You expect special treatment? No, Luna. Then perhaps you need additional responsibilities. Additional responsibilities. The phrase sounded harmless. It wasn't. By the end of the week, my workload had doubled. And my health continued to decline. The cough worsened. Fever followed. Some mornings I woke shivering uncontrollably. Other mornings I could barely stand. Yet every request for rest was denied. Every sign of illness was dismissed as laziness. Every weakness became evidence of failure. One night, rain hammered the livestock shed relentlessly. Water pooled across the floor. Cold seeped into my bones. I curled beneath my blanket and tried to stop shaking. It didn't work. Nothing worked. For the first time in years, I felt afraid. Truly afraid. Because I wasn't just miserable anymore. I was sick. Very sick. And nobody cared. Far away in the Alpha house, Rowan Blackwood was beginning to notice something strange. Servants became nervous whenever he asked questions. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. Certain records seemed to disappear before he could review them. Small things. Suspicious things. Pieces of a puzzle he couldn't yet see. And among those missing pieces was a servant girl named Mira. The same servant he had briefly noticed during his welcome ceremony. The same servant Luna Victoria seemed determined to erase. 3 nights later, my fever became unbearable. Every breath hurt. Every movement exhausted me. The world felt distant. Dreamlike. Wrong. I lay alone in the darkness while rain leaked through the broken roof. Listening. Waiting. Wondering if morning would come. Wondering if I would. And, somewhere deep inside, a terrible realization finally took shape. If nothing changed soon, I was going to die. Not in battle. Not protecting anyone. Not for some noble cause. I would die cold. Hungry. Forgotten. Alone in a shed. Exactly where Luna Victoria wanted me. The fever worsened. At first, I tried to hide it. I had hidden pain before. Hunger. Bruises. Exhaustion. Loneliness. Those things became easier to conceal after years of practice. But fever was different. Fever stole control. It blurred reality. It made simple tasks feel impossible. And no matter how hard I tried, my body could no longer pretend everything was fine. The next morning, I collapsed while carrying firewood. One moment, I was walking. The next, the ground rushed toward me. The logs scattered across the dirt. Pain exploded through my shoulder. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Couldn't think. A pair of kitchen servants rushed forward. "Mira, get some water." Their voices sounded distant, like echoes underwater. I blinked slowly. The world refused to focus. Everything seemed covered in fog. Someone pressed a hand against my forehead. A sharp intake of breath followed. "She's burning up." Another servant looked around nervously. "We should get a healer." The suggestion filled me with hope. Tiny. Fragile. But hope nonetheless. Unfortunately, hope didn't survive long. A familiar voice interrupted. "No." The servants froze. So did I. Even before turning, I knew who had spoken. Luna Victoria. She approached calmly. Elegantly. Like a queen inspecting something unpleasant. Her eyes moved from me to the scattered firewood. Then back again. No concern. No sympathy. Only irritation. "She's sick," one servant said carefully. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "And?" The servant hesitated. "She needs treatment." The Luna's expression hardened instantly. "No." The word landed like a hammer. The servant swallowed. "But..." I said no. Silence followed. Heavy. Dangerous. Nobody challenged her further. Nobody ever did. Victoria looked down at me. "Get up." I tried. My legs failed immediately. The world spun. Dark spots filled my vision. A wave of nausea rolled through me. Something dangerous flashed in her eyes. Not concern. Anger. As if my weakness offended her. As if illness itself were a personal insult. Pathetic. The word cut deeper than I expected. Because part of me feared she was right. Part of me feared I really was weak. Broken. Worthless. "Take her back to the livestock shed." The servants exchanged uneasy glances. One finally whispered, "Luna, she might not survive." Victoria's smile appeared. Cold. Cruel. Terrifying. Then perhaps she should have worked harder. Nobody spoke after that. Nobody objected. Nobody helped. Because helping me meant risking themselves. And fear always won. The servants carried me back to the shed. At least they were gentle. That small kindness nearly made me cry. When they left, silence returned. Rain tapped softly against the roof. Wind slipped through the cracks. The cold felt sharper than ever. I curled beneath my blanket, shivering uncontrollably. My lungs burned. Each breath hurt. Each cough felt like knives inside my chest. Hours passed. Or maybe days. Time became difficult to track. The fever stole pieces of reality. Moments blurred together. Dreams mixed with memories. Nothing felt certain anymore. At one point, I thought I heard my mother singing. A soft lullaby. Warm. Gentle. Safe. I hadn't heard it since childhood. Hadn't remembered it in years. Yet suddenly it felt real. Close. I opened my eyes. The shed was empty. Of course. No mother. No family. No one. Only rain. Only darkness. Only me. Tears slipped silently down my face. Not because of pain. Because of loneliness. Because somewhere deep inside, I realized I didn't want to die. Not like this. Not forgotten. Not unloved. Meanwhile, inside the Alpha house, something unexpected was happening. Rowan Blackwood sat alone in his office. A stack of reports covered his desk. Border disputes. Trade agreements. Warrior assignments. Routine matters. Important matters. Yet his attention kept drifting elsewhere. To a servant girl. The realization irritated him. He barely knew her. Had spoken only a few words. Yet something about the courtyard incident continued to bother him. Not the dropped tray. Not the interruption. Victoria's reaction. He had seen fear before. Seen punishment. Seen discipline. But what he witnessed that day felt different. Personal. Targeted. Rowan leaned back in his chair. His golden eyes narrowed thoughtfully. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Enter. One of his senior warriors stepped inside. My king. What is it? The warrior hesitated. Unusual. Rowan immediately noticed. Speak. The warrior shifted uncomfortably. There have been complaints. About what? Servant treatment. The room fell silent. Rowan's expression hardened. Explain. The warrior carefully chose his words. As you know, most servants are reluctant to report abuse. A pause. But rumors have spread. Rowan sat forward. Rumors involving whom? The warrior looked away briefly. Then answered. Luna Victoria. Silence. Dangerous silence. Rowan's gaze became unreadable. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. More controlled. What kind of rumors? The warrior hesitated. Then spoke. Excessive punishments. Neglect. Targeted mistreatment. A pause. And one servant in particular. Rowan immediately thought of her. The girl from the courtyard. What servant? The warrior swallowed. Mira. Something shifted in Rowan's expression. Small. Almost invisible. But significant. Where is she now? The warrior frowned. I don't know. That answer was unacceptable. Both men knew it. Rowan stood. Slowly. Deliberately. The room's atmosphere changed immediately. Every warrior recognized that shift. The shift that happened when their Alpha King decided something required personal investigation. Find her. The command was simple. Direct. Final. The warrior bowed instantly. Yes, my king. As the door closed, Rowan walked toward the window. Rain continued falling outside. Cold. Relentless. Unforgiving. For reasons he couldn't fully explain. A sense of unease settled inside him. A feeling that time was running out. A feeling that something terrible had already happened. And far across the pack grounds, inside a collapsing livestock shed, I lay trembling beneath a soaked blanket. Barely conscious. Barely breathing. Unaware that for the first time in years, someone powerful was finally looking for me. The storm arrived after midnight. Not an ordinary storm. A mountain storm. The kind that rattled windows, uprooted trees, and turned dirt roads into rivers of mud. Thunder shook the ground beneath the livestock shed. Each crash echoed through my fever-clouded mind. I barely noticed. By then, even opening my eyes felt exhausting. The blanket covering me was soaked. Rain leaked through dozens of holes in the broken roof. Cold water dripped onto my face. My hands. My chest. Every part of me trembled uncontrollably. I tried to sit up. Failed. The effort alone triggered a violent coughing fit. Pain tore through my lungs. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't stop the darkness creeping around the edges of my vision. Somewhere deep inside, fear finally surfaced. Not fear of Victoria. Not fear of punishment. Fear of dying. Real dying. Permanent. Final. I had survived years of cruelty. Years of humiliation. Years of loneliness. But none of those things had prepared me for this. The quiet realization that I might never see another sunrise. The storm intensified. Wind howled through the gaps in the wooden walls. The entire structure groaned dangerously. The old shed was failing. Just like me. Across the pack grounds, lanterns flickered in the darkness. Most wolves remained inside their homes. Safe, warm, protected. But one wolf was awake. And searching. Alpha Rowan Blackwood. His investigation had begun immediately after speaking with the warrior. At first, he expected simple answers. Routine explanations. Nothing unusual. Instead, every question created more confusion. Where was Mira assigned? No one knew. Why had servant records been altered? No one knew. Why did people become nervous whenever her name appeared? No one knew. Or pretended not to. Rowan hated lies. Especially obvious ones. By midnight, his patience was gone. The Alpha house felt strangely silent as he moved through its corridors. Servants avoided eye contact. Guards stood unusually stiff. Everyone seemed aware something was wrong. Finally, Rowan found the head servant. The older man looked exhausted. Worried. Guilty. Where is she? The question required no explanation. The servant immediately knew who Rowan meant. Fear flashed across his face. My king. Rowan's eyes hardened. Where? The servant hesitated. A mistake. The temperature inside the room seemed to drop instantly. Every wolf present felt it. The pressure of an Alpha King's authority. I asked a question. The servant swallowed hard. Then finally answered. The livestock shed. Silence. Rowan stared at him. The abandoned one? The servant lowered his head. Yes. Something dangerous entered Rowan's expression. Not rage. Not yet. But the beginning of it. Why? The servant's voice nearly broke. It was Luna Victoria's order. The room fell completely silent. Rowan said nothing, which somehow felt worse. Several seconds passed. Then he turned. Walked toward the door. My king. Rowan stopped. Only briefly. If she's not there. His voice remained calm. Controlled. Cold. We'll discuss why everyone in this pack suddenly forgot how to tell the truth. Then he left. Outside, rain slammed into the ground. The storm showed no sign of weakening. Most wolves would have waited until morning. Not Rowan. Within minutes, he was crossing the pack grounds. Alone. Ignoring the weather. Ignoring the darkness. Following a growing sense of dread. Meanwhile, inside the livestock shed, I drifted in and out of consciousness. The fever had become unbearable. Reality felt distant. Unstable. Like a dream slowly unraveling. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps. Approaching through the rain. I tried to open my eyes. Couldn't. The sound disappeared. Or maybe it never existed. The fever made everything uncertain. Thunder exploded overhead. The shed shook violently. Wood cracked somewhere above me. A piece of the roof collapsed. The impact sent debris crashing onto the floor nearby. I flinched weakly, but lacked the strength to move. Cold rain immediately poured through the new opening, soaking everything, including me. For the first time, genuine panic surfaced. I was trapped. Too weak to stand. Too weak to run. Too weak to save myself. The realization hurt almost as much as the illness. Another coughing fit struck. Worse than before. Much worse. This time, something warm touched my lips. I lifted trembling fingers. Looked. Blood. My heart stopped. Not much. Just a small amount. But enough. Enough to understand what it meant. The fear that followed was overwhelming. I didn't want to die. I really didn't. Not because my life had been wonderful. It hadn't. But because somewhere deep inside, a small stubborn part of me still believed things could get better. Someday. Somehow. Tears slipped down my face, mixed with rainwater. The darkness surrounding my vision expanded further. Everything felt colder. More distant. And then, the shed door exploded inward. The sound was so sudden, so violent, that for a moment I thought lightning had struck the building. Wind rushed inside. Rain followed. A tall figure stepped through the storm. Broad shoulders. Dark clothing. golden eyes. For several seconds, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. Perhaps it was another fever dream. Another hallucination. The figure moved closer, then stopped. I heard a sharp intake of breath. Silence followed. Heavy. Shocked. Horrified. Through blurred vision, I finally recognized him. Alpha Rowan Blackwood. Standing in the doorway. Staring directly at me. And judging by the expression on his face, he had just realized exactly what had been done to me. For a moment, neither of us moved. The storm roared outside. Rain hammered the broken roof. Wind howled through the shattered walls. Yet all of it seemed distant. Muted. Because Alpha Rowan Blackwood was staring at me. And the look on his face was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Shock. Disbelief. Fury. All at once. His golden eyes swept across the shed. The collapsed roof. The flooded floor. The soaked blanket. The blood on my lips. The bruises I hadn't managed to hide. The reality of my condition. And with every detail he noticed, his expression darkened. I tried to sit up. Failed immediately. A weak cough escaped my chest. Rowan crossed the distance between us in seconds. Kneel. The automatic response died halfway out of my mouth. I couldn't even manage that. His jaw tightened. Don't move. The command wasn't harsh. It wasn't angry. It sounded concerned. Concerned. For me. The thought felt so unfamiliar that I almost laughed. Instead, another coughing fit struck. This one worse than the last. Pain ripped through my chest. The room spun violently. When it finally passed, Rowan was kneeling beside me. A king. Kneeling in filthy mud. Because of a servant. The sight didn't make sense. Nothing about this situation made sense. His hand touched my forehead. Immediately his expression hardened. You're burning with fever. I lowered my gaze. I'm sorry. The words escaped automatically. Years of conditioning. Years of punishment. Years of believing every problem was somehow my fault. Something flashed across Rowan's face. Something sharp. Painful. Why are you apologizing? I didn't know how to answer. Because I honestly wasn't sure. Silence stretched between us. Then his eyes narrowed slightly. How long have you been here? I hesitated. His voice softened. Tell me the truth. The gentleness nearly broke me. A few weeks. His expression froze. A few weeks. I nodded weakly. Rain continued falling around us. The Alpha King's jaw clenched. So tightly that I could see the muscles moving beneath his skin. And nobody reported this? I looked away. That answer told him everything. Several dangerous seconds passed. Then Rowan stood. Slowly. Deliberately. The temperature inside the shed seemed to drop. Not because of the weather. Because of him. For the first time, I truly understood why other alphas feared Rowan Blackwood. Not because he was loud. Not because he was cruel. Because when he became angry, he became quiet. Terrifyingly quiet. A low growl rumbled through the room. Not from his throat. From somewhere deeper. His wolf. The sound sent a chill through me. Rowan closed his eyes briefly, as if fighting for control. When he opened them again, the fury remained. But it was contained. Focused. Can you stand? I tried. My legs immediately buckled. The world tilted. Darkness surged forward. Before I could fall, strong arms caught me. I froze. Nobody had held me like that since I was a child. For one fragile second, I forgot how to breathe. Rowan's expression tightened. You weigh almost nothing. The observation wasn't meant to be cruel, which somehow made it hurt more. Because it was true. Weeks of hunger. Months of overwork. Years of neglect. My body carried the evidence. Without another word, Rowan lifted me into his arms. I stared at him in shock. My king. No. The single word stopped me immediately. His gaze met mine. You're done apologizing. Something inside me cracked. Not physically. Emotionally. Because no one had ever said that before. No one had ever told me I didn't need to apologize for existing. Tears immediately filled my eyes. Embarrassed, I turned away. Rowan pretended not to notice. Or perhaps he noticed and chose kindness. Either way, I was grateful. The The storm battered us as he carried me toward the Alpha house. Pack members stopped and stared. Some looked shocked. Some looked confused. Others looked terrified. Because the sight was impossible to ignore. The Alpha King himself carrying a servant through the rain. Word spread instantly. By the time we reached the main courtyard, dozens of wolves had gathered. Whispers followed us everywhere. What happened? Who is she? Why is the Alpha carrying her? The questions multiplied. Nobody had answers. Yet, the great doors opened. Servants rushed forward. Several immediately gasped when they saw my condition. Healer. Rowan's voice cut through the room like a blade. Now. Nobody hesitated. Several servants ran. Others prepared blankets. Someone brought hot water. The sudden attention felt overwhelming. Unreal. For years I had suffered in silence. Ignored. Overlooked. Forgotten. Now suddenly everyone seemed to care. Part of me didn't know what to do with that. The healer arrived minutes later. An older woman named Alara. The moment she examined me, her expression darkened. She should have been treated days ago. The room fell silent. Rowan looked up. How serious is it? The healer hesitated. A bad sign. Tell me. Alara sighed. The infection is severe. A pause. The fever is dangerous. Another pause. And if she'd remained in that shed much longer. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Everyone understood. I almost died. The realization settled over the room like a storm cloud. And when Rowan looked toward the doorway, his expression promised something terrifying. Because someone was about to answer for what happened. And Luna Victoria had no idea the Alpha King had finally seen the truth. The room remained silent after the healer's words. She would have died. The statement lingered in the air. Heavy. Unavoidable. Terrifying. I lay beneath warm blankets in one of the guest chambers of the Alpha house. The heat felt strange after so many cold nights. So did the softness of the mattress. Part of me still expected someone to drag me back to the shed. To tell me this was a mistake. A dream. Something temporary. But when I opened my eyes again, Rowan was still there. Standing near the window. Watching the storm outside. His posture was calm. His expression was not. Even from across the room, I could feel the anger radiating from him. Not uncontrolled anger. Not reckless anger. The dangerous kind. The kind that waited. The kind that planned. The healer finished preparing medicine. Then looked directly at Rowan. My king. Yes. She didn't end up in that condition accidentally. The statement wasn't a question. Rowan's jaw tightened. I know. The healer glanced toward me. Then back at him. If you want the truth, ask the servants. A pause. Not the officials. Rowan nodded once. The healer bowed slightly and left. The room became quiet again. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Rowan finally turned toward me. Can you answer a few questions? I immediately tried to sit up. Pain shot through my body. He frowned. Lie down. I obeyed. Years of being ordered around made that easy. The difference was that Rowan's commands didn't feel like punishment. They felt like concern. The realization still confused me. How long have you worked for this pack? He asked. Most of my life. His gaze sharpened. Most? I nodded. I was brought here when I was young. How young? 5. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise. Concern. Maybe even confusion. What happened to your family? The question hurt. Not because I knew the answer. Because I didn't. I don't remember much. Rowan remained silent. Waiting. My parents disappeared. The words felt strange. Empty. That's what I was told. Told by whom? I hesitated. The elders. His expression darkened slightly. And no one ever explained further? I shook my head. No. The answer seemed to bother him. A lot. Before he could ask another question, the chamber door opened. A servant entered. Breathing hard. Clearly nervous. My king. Rowan turned immediately. What is it? The servant swallowed. Luna Victoria requests an audience. The room went still. Even I felt my stomach tighten. Victoria. Part of me still feared her. A deeply rooted fear built over years. The fear of someone who held power over every part of your life. Rowan's expression became unreadable. Send her in. The servant bowed and left. A few moments later, Victoria entered. She looked perfect. As always. Elegant dress. Perfect posture. Perfect smile. But something seemed different. Nervous. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know how much Rowan had discovered. My king. She bowed gracefully. Then her eyes landed on me. For the briefest moment, her mask slipped. Shock. Fear. Then it disappeared. Replaced by warmth. Concern. Performance. Oh, Mira. Her voice dripped with false sympathy. I heard you were ill. I stared at her, unable to respond. Because suddenly I understood something. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about Rowan. Worried about what he knew. Worried about what he might learn. Rowan watched her carefully. Very carefully. Luna Victoria. His voice remained calm. Too calm. I visited the livestock shed tonight. The color drained slightly from her face. Only slightly. But enough. I see. Do you? The room grew colder. Victoria's smile strained. My king, if this concerns the servant girl. The servant girl almost died. The interruption landed like a blade. Silence followed. For the first time since entering the room, Victoria looked uncertain. Surely you're not suggesting. I am asking. His golden eyes locked onto hers. Why was a sick servant living in an abandoned shed? Victoria hesitated. A terrible mistake. Because hesitation looked a lot like guilt. She was being disciplined. Rowan's expression didn't change. For what? Repeated mistakes. I lowered my gaze. The old instinct returned immediately. Fear. Shame. The certainty that somehow this would become my fault. Then Rowan spoke again. And starvation? Victoria froze. The room became deathly silent. And untreated illness? Rowan continued. And forcing her to sleep in a collapsing structure during storm season? Each question struck harder than the last. Victoria's composure finally cracked. My king, you don't understand. No. The single word stopped her. The pressure in the room intensified immediately. Every wolf present felt it. Alpha authority. Raw. Controlled. Absolute. I understand perfectly. Victoria took a small step backward. The first sign of genuine fear. And for the first time since I had known her, I realized she wasn't afraid of losing power. She was afraid of Rowan. Because unlike everyone else in the pack, he wasn't willing to look away. And deep down, she knew exactly what that meant. The silence inside the room felt suffocating. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the servants standing near the doorway seemed afraid to breathe. Because everyone understood what was happening. For the first time in years, Luna Victoria was being questioned. Not by a servant. Not by an elder. Not by someone she could intimidate into silence. By the Alpha King himself. Victoria tried to recover. To regain control. To rebuild the perfect mask she wore so well. My king, she said carefully, you've only heard one side of the story. Rowan's expression remained unchanged. Then give me the other side. Victoria hesitated. Another mistake. The hesitation lasted only a second. But it was enough. Enough for everyone to see. Enough for Rowan to notice. Finally, she straightened her shoulders. The girl has always been difficult. I blinked. Difficult? The word almost made me laugh. I spent years obeying every order. Years accepting punishment without complaint. Years lowering my head whenever she entered a room. Yet somehow, I was difficult. How? Rowan asked. Victoria opened her mouth. Then paused. The answer never came. Because there wasn't one. The room noticed. So did Rowan. His eyes narrowed slightly. A dangerous sign. Interesting. The single word carried more weight than shouting ever could. Victoria's confidence slipped further. My king, surely one servant isn't worth this much concern. The moment the words left her mouth, I knew she had made a mistake. A huge mistake. Because Rowan's expression changed instantly. Not anger. Disappointment. And somehow that looked worse. One servant. He repeated the phrase slowly. As if examining it. Testing it. Then his gaze shifted toward me. Toward the bruises. The fever. The weakness. The damage. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. That's exactly the problem. Victoria froze. Rowan took a step forward. If this is how you treat one servant. A pause. How many others suffered because nobody was watching? The question shattered the room. No one had considered that. Or perhaps they had, and simply hoped nobody would ask. Victoria's face paled visibly. My king, that's unfair. No. Another step. What's unfair is finding a young woman half dead in a collapsing shed while the people responsible pretend everything is normal. The room fell silent again. Victoria looked trapped. For the first time since I'd known her. She had nowhere to run. No servant to blame. No convenient excuse. No frightened witness to silence. Just truth. And truth was winning. The chamber door suddenly opened. A guard entered. My king. Rowan didn't look away from Victoria. What is it? The guard bowed. We found the messenger. Every muscle in my body tensed. The messenger. The one who had asked about my parents. The one who seemed terrified. Rowan immediately noticed my reaction. So there was a messenger. I froze. I hadn't meant to reveal anything. But it was too late. The Alpha King's eyes sharpened. What messenger? Victoria looked alarmed. A reaction she failed to hide. And Rowan saw that too. Slowly. Very slowly. The pieces began falling into place. The messenger was brought into the room. He looked exhausted. Frightened. And very aware of how dangerous this situation had become. Rowan studied him carefully. Tell me what you told Mira. The messenger swallowed hard. Silence. Then he glanced toward Victoria. A terrible mistake. Rowan noticed immediately. So she knows. Victoria's face lost more color. The messenger closed his eyes briefly, as if accepting his fate. Then he spoke. There were records. The room became silent. What records? Rowan asked. The messenger's voice trembled. Old records. About whom? The messenger looked directly at me. And everything changed. About her. I felt my heart stop. The room seemed to tilt. For years, I had lived without answers. Without family. Without history. Without knowing where I came from. Now suddenly, the truth stood only a few words away. Rowan folded his arms. Continue. The messenger nodded weakly. When Mira was brought to the pack. A pause. Certain records were sealed. Victoria stepped forward. That's enough. The Alpha King's gaze snapped toward her. The pressure in the room exploded. Sit down. Victoria immediately obeyed. The realization shocked everyone, including her, because she wasn't obeying a request. She was obeying an Alpha King's command. And for the first time, she couldn't resist. The messenger continued. Her parents didn't abandon her. I stopped breathing. They were attacked. My vision blurred. The room seemed very far away. What happened to them? Rowan asked quietly. The messenger hesitated, then answered. They were murdered. The world shattered. Not physically. Emotionally. Years of uncertainty. Years of wondering. Years of hoping. Gone. Replaced by a truth so painful I could barely process it. My parents were dead. Not missing. Not lost. Dead. Tears immediately filled my eyes. Across the room, Rowan's expression darkened further. And who sealed the records? The messenger looked toward Victoria. Nobody missed it. Nobody. The silence that followed felt endless. Because everyone finally understood. This wasn't just cruelty. This wasn't just abuse. It was something much bigger. Much older. Much darker. And Luna Victoria had been hiding it for years. The room stood frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The messenger's final words still echoed through the chamber. Luna Victoria sealed the records. For years, I had believed I was nobody. An orphan. A servant. A burden the pack tolerated. Nothing more. Now, in a matter of minutes, everything had changed. My parents hadn't abandoned me. They hadn't disappeared. They had been murdered. And someone had hidden the truth. My hands trembled beneath the blankets. Part of me wanted answers. Another part feared them, because every answer seemed to reveal something worse. Across the room, Victoria looked cornered. For perhaps the first time in her life. My king. Enough. Rowan's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. The Luna immediately fell silent. The Alpha King turned toward the messenger. Bring me every sealed record. Yes, my king. And every document connected to Mira's arrival. The messenger bowed. Immediately. Within minutes, servants and guards were moving throughout the Alpha House. Searching archives. Opening forgotten storage rooms. Recovering records hidden for years. Victoria remained silent. Watching. Waiting. Hoping. But hope was no longer on her side. An hour later, the records arrived. Boxes. Scrolls. Letters. Reports. Documents that should never have disappeared. Rowan reviewed them personally. Page after page. Line after line. The deeper he looked, the darker his expression became. Finally, he stopped. The room waited. Nobody dared interrupt. Then Rowan slowly lifted one document. This is signed by 3 elders. Silence. This report confirms that Mira's parents were loyal pack members. I stared at him, unable to breathe. They died protecting pack territory from rogue attackers. Tears filled my eyes instantly. For years, I had imagined 100 possibilities. Most of them painful. Yet somehow, learning they died protecting others hurt and healed me at the same time. They hadn't abandoned me. They loved me. The realization nearly broke me. Rowan continued reading. Then his expression turned cold. Dangerously cold. The compensation owed to their daughter was never delivered. A murmur spread through the room. Several elders looked shocked. Others looked terrified. Because now the corruption was visible. Recorded. Proven. Documented. No lies could erase it. No excuses could hide it. The Alpha King lowered the report. His gaze found Victoria. Do you deny any of this? Silence. Victoria opened her mouth. Closed it. Then lowered her eyes. That answer spoke louder than words ever could. The room understood. She knew. She had always known. And she had done nothing. Worse. She had benefited from it. The punishment came immediately. Rowan's voice echoed through the chamber. Luna Victoria is hereby stripped of authority pending formal judgment. Gasps filled the room. Several servants covered their mouths. Because such a punishment was almost unheard of. Yet nobody objected. Nobody could. The evidence was overwhelming. The truth undeniable. Victoria looked stunned. For years she had ruled through fear. Now fear ruled her. Guards stepped forward. Not aggressively. Not cruelly. But firmly. The message was clear. Her power was gone. At least for now. As she was escorted away, her eyes found mine. The hatred inside them was unmistakable. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Because she couldn't hurt me anymore. The door closed behind her. And just like that, a chapter of my life ended. The room felt strangely lighter afterward. As if a storm had finally passed. Several elders approached, offering apologies, regret, excuses. I listened politely. But their words couldn't erase years of suffering. Some wounds simply take longer to heal. Eventually everyone left. Everyone except Rowan. The Alpha King remained near the window, watching the sunrise. The storm had ended. Golden light spilled across the mountains. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he finally turned toward me. How are you feeling? The question sounded so ordinary. Yet it carried a kindness I still wasn't used to. Tired. A faint smile touched his face. I imagine you are. For the first time, I smiled back. A real smile. Not forced. Not frightened. Real. The moment felt strange. Warm. Safe. Something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Rowan stepped closer. The healer says you'll recover. I nodded. Good. A brief silence followed. Then he surprised me. You're staying here. I blinked. Here. The Alpha House. My eyes widened. My king, I couldn't possibly. Yes. The interruption was gentle. Firm. Final. You could. Emotion tightened my throat. After years of sleeping in stables, in sheds, in cold corners nobody wanted, the offer felt impossible, unreal. Tears threatened again. I quickly looked away, embarrassed. Rowan pretended not to notice. Again. And once more, I was grateful. The morning sun continued rising. For the first time in years, I wasn't cold. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. For the first time in years, I had answers. Not all of them, but enough to begin. My parents had loved me. Their sacrifice mattered. The truth survived. And somehow, against every possibility, against every expectation, against every cruel thing life had thrown at me, I was still here, alive. The Luna had forced me to sleep in the stables. She had left me in a collapsing shed. She had nearly destroyed me. But in the end, the truth reached the Alpha King. And when he found me dying in the storm, everything changed. Epilogue. Months later, the livestock shed was torn down. The stable where I once slept was rebuilt. Servants received protections they had never possessed before. Hidden abuses were exposed. Corrupt officials were removed. And every time I walked through the Alpha house, I remembered the night the storm nearly claimed my life. Not with bitterness, with gratitude. Because sometimes the darkest night becomes the beginning of a new life. And mine began the moment the Alpha King opened the door and saw me. If this story kept you hooked until the very end, join the Midnight Pack and subscribe for new werewolf stories every week. The next tale is already waiting.